Hello dear students, hope you are doing well. I am Nabi Hassan, your science teacher, and today I am going to teach second chapter, that is acids, bases and salts. So to start with, what is an acid? In general, you can find out from the taste. If the taste is sour, say you can take the example of lemon, it contains acid. But if the taste of the compound is bitter, then the compound contains base. Say for example, soap, baking powder. These compounds are basic in nature. Now chemically, we can find out acid and base, or we can define acid or base from their tendency to give hydrogen ion or hydroxyl ion. So we can say acids are the compounds having tendency to give hydrogen ion in water. So you take an acid, or say you are taking a compound, you dissolve it in water, and if it gives out H positive, say you take a compound, dissolve it in water, if it gives out hydroxyl ion, then the compound is base. You can take the example of HCl. HCl, if you dissolve it in water, it will ionize and give H positive and Cl negative. So you can see there is H positive ion in the solution. So therefore, HCl is an acid. You take NaOH, which is known as sodium hydroxide. You dissolve it in water, you'll get Na positive and OH negative. So you can see this compound gives out OH negative, that is hydroxyl ion. So this compound is a base. You can take more example like H2SO4, which is known as sulfuric acid. If you dissolve it in water, you'll get H positive and SO4 2 negative. Now since it gives out H positive, it's an acid. You take KOH, dissolve it in water, you get K positive and OH negative. It gives out OH negative, that is hydroxyl ion, so therefore this is a base. So in general, we can say the compound on dissolving in water, if it gives out H positive, the compound is acid. If it gives out OH negative, the compound is base. Next, what is salt? You take an acid, say HCl, and replace the hydrogen with a metal like Na, sodium. It gives salt. That means we can say if the hydrogen in acid is replaced by a metal, the compound formed is known as salt. You can take one more example, H2SO4, which is known as sulfuric acid. Now you replace the hydrogen with sodium, it forms Na2SO4, and this is a salt. So salt is a compound formed when the hydrogen atom in acid is replaced by a metal. Next, strength of acids and bases. Now, how do we find out the strength of an acid, like whether it's a strong acid or a weak acid? whether it's a strong base or a weak base, it depends on its tendency to undergo ionization. Its tendency to undergo ionization, or you can say dissociation. You take a compound, say HCl. If you dissolve it in water, HCl will undergo complete dissociation. So if it undergoes complete dissociation, the compound is known as strong acid, or the acid is known as strong acid. Whereas the acid which undergoes partial dissociation, if you take H2CO3, which is known as carbonic acid, it will undergo partial dissociation. HCO3 will further dissociate into H positive and CO3 to negative. Now when you study the solution of carbonic acid, you'll find it does not undergo complete dissociation. That means it does not undergo 100% dissociation. That means we can say it undergoes partial dissociation. So in this case, carbonic acid is known as weak acid. Similarly for bases also, if the base undergoes complete dissociation to give hydroxyl ion, it is known as strong base. If it undergoes partial dissociation, it is known as weak base. Next, let us see the properties of acids and bases. So first, let us see the reaction of acid and base with metal. If an acid reacts with a metal, it forms salt and hydrogen gas. Similarly, if base reacts with a metal, it forms salt and hydrogen gas. Let us see with the help of an example. Na, sodium metal. If it reacts with an acid, let us take HCl, that is hydrochloric acid. So sodium is electropositive in nature. That means they have this tendency to give electron. Now sodium being electropositive will go for the negative part in the acid. If you see the acid, H is positive, Cl is negative. So metal will go with the negative part, that is Cl, and will form NaCl. Plus, the hydrogen which is left here is unstable because hydrogen atom or ion is highly unstable. So it will form H2, that is hydrogen gas. So NaCl is salt plus we get hydrogen gas. So a metal reacts with an acid, forms salt and hydrogen gas. You can take one more example. Say sodium reacts with sulfuric acid, that is H2SO4. Now sodium again being electropositive will take the negative part, that is SO4, and will form Na2SO4, plus you will get hydrogen gas. So we get salt plus hydrogen gas. Let us see the reaction of base with metal. Let us take zinc metal. Let it react with sodium hydroxide, which is a base. It will form Na2ZnO2. This is the salt formed And in addition to this, you will get hydrogen gas. So every time an acid or a base reacts with metal, it forms salt and hydrogen gas. Next, let us see the reaction of acid. Second property, reaction of an acid with methyl carbonate and methyl bicarbonate. So if an acid reacts with methyl carbonate or methyl bicarbonate, it forms salt, carbon dioxide and water. So carbonate, that is methyl carbonate or methyl bicarbonate. If it reacts with acid, it forms salt, carbon dioxide and water. Let us try to understand this with the help of a reaction. Let us take sodium carbonate, that is Na2CO3. If it reacts with an acid like HCl, first sodium, which is electropositive, will take the electronegative, that is Cl, and will form the salt, that is NaCl. In addition to that, hydrogen with carbonate will form hydrogen carbonate, that is H2CO3. Now this is unstable. H2SCO3 is unstable, so it will decompose to form H2O, that is water molecule, and carbon dioxide. So we can say methyl carbonate, like sodium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, calcium carbonate, if they react with an acid, they form salt, water and carbon dioxide. Let us see the reaction of acid with methyl bicarbonate. So we'll take NaHCO3. Methyl bicarbonate, its name is sodium hydrogen carbonate. If it reacts with HCl, acid, again sodium will take chloride and will form sodium chloride. So this is the salt formed, plus HCO3 will take H, will form H2CO3, which will further decompose to give water and carbon dioxide. So every time methyl carbonate or methyl bicarbonate, if it reacts with acid, it will form salt, carbon dioxide and water. Let us see the third property, that is a reaction of acid and base. Acid and base, if they react, they form salt and water. Acid, base, if they react, their property, like the acidic property of the acid, basic property of the base will get neutralized and they will form salt and water. Now in this reaction, since the acidic and the basic property of the compound gets neutralized, this reaction is also known as neutralization reaction. Let us take an example. NaOH, which is a base, because it has the tendency to give hydroxyl ion in solution, reacts with an acid, that is HCl. Now we know if NaOH reacts with HCl, Na will first take Cl and will go out as NaCl, which is salt. And OH will take H and will form water, that is H2O. Now here the reaction is positive part from base will take the negative part from acid, and the positive part from acid will take the negative part from the base. Sodium is positive, OH is negative, H is positive, Cl is negative. So the positive part of the base goes with the negative part of the acid, positive part of the acid goes with the negative part of the base. So in both the compound, the ions are displaced. So this reaction is also an example of double displacement reaction. Let us see the next property, that is a reaction of acid with methyl oxide. Methyl oxide, if it reacts with an acid, it forms salt and water. Let us take an example. Na2O. Sodium oxide is a methyl oxide. If it reacts with an acid like HCl, we know the first thing, Na will take Cl, will go out as NaCl, so this is the salt form, plus the hydrogen will go with the oxygen and forms H2O. So methyl oxide, if it reacts with acid, it forms salt and water. You can take more example like MgO, magnesium oxide. If it reacts with sulfuric acid, that is H2SO4, it will form the salt MgSO4, magnesium sulfate, and water. Let us see the next property, that is a reaction of base with non-metal oxide. So non-metal oxide, if it reacts with base, it forms salt and water. So let us take the example of NaOH, which is a base. So sodium hydroxide, which is a base, if it reacts with non-metal oxide. What is meant by non-metal oxide? Like metal oxide is a compound formed by metal and oxygen. Similarly, non-metal oxide is a compound formed by non-metal with oxygen. For example, carbon dioxide. Carbon is a non-metal, forms compounds with oxygen, so this is non-metal oxide. So if sodium hydroxide reacts with carbon dioxide, it will form the salt Na2CO3, that is sodium carbonate, along with water. So base, if it reacts with non-metal oxide, it forms salt and water. So thank you for today. In the next video, we'll be studying the rest of the topics from this chapter, that is pH scale and some important compounds.